Welcome all to the August chapter meeting of the San Fernando Valley chapter of the Climate Reality Project. We are glad you could join us tonight, and we've got some interesting stuff to talk about for sure. Before we dive straight into all the material we want to cover, we're going to pause for a land acknowledgement. And tonight's land acknowledgement will be given by chapter member Cher Gilmore. Cher is a group leader of the Santa Clarita chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. And she's also the co-founder and co-facilitator of the San Clarita Valley Eco Alliance. In her other life, she is also a contributing writer for Share International magazine and advertising coordinator for Share International USA. So you might want to check out her magazine writing sometime if you are interested in what she does. Cher, will you go ahead and give our land acknowledgement tonight?
A land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples as stewards of this land and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. It acknowledges the history that has brought us to reside on this land, the colonialism that is present in our current systems, and calls on us to be mindful of our own present participation in it. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Tongva, Quiche, Tataviam, and Chumash tribes.
Wonderful, Cher. Thank you for that. And if anyone here is calling in from somewhere else outside the valley, feel free to put the tribes whose land you are on into the chat so we can acknowledge those as well. I myself am in Woodland Hills over in the Tongva Chumash corner of the valley. All right, let's think about renewable energy. I'm going to toss this over to Terry to introduce tonight's guest speakers, and we are going to learn all about where our energy comes from and how that's going to improve over the next decade, I hope. Terry, take it away.
Thanks, Sharon. I'd like to introduce Dan and Ravi. Dan graduated from Caltech in 1986 with a degree in engineering and applied science and biology. Since then, he's worked as a software engineer at JPL, Google, and now Fastly. Has always remained interested in science, biology, and renewable energy. He bought his first solar cell in 1977 and has had a solar roof for 15 years and an EV for 9. He is a past chair of the LA Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance's Energy Committee and was their delegate to the LADWP LA100 Plan Advisory Group. Ravi is president of the Delray Neighborhood Council and has served as LANCSA's alternative representative to the LADWP LA100 Advisory Group. He has 20 years experience in the electric power industry, primarily developing large-scale wind and solar energy projects that deliver clean electricity to customers in California and throughout the U.S. West, including multiple projects that directly serve the city of Los Angeles. Thank you, Dan and Ravi, for being here. Dan, I don't know who's going to start the show. Is it Ravi or is it Dan?
Well, Dan, you want to just tee it off and start the slides, and we can go from there?
Right. So, hello. What we're going to go over is 16 selected slides from the presentations that we saw when we were on the advisory group, and give a little context, and maybe express an opinion or two. But this is really just a droplet. If you want the rest, go to dwp.com/sltrp, and the rest of the presentations are there. The last three are the best, I think. So Ravi, take it away. This is how we got here.
Yeah, and first off, just thank you for all that you guys are doing. That was really heartwarming to hear about all your activities. It's not a fun time to be a climate advocate right now because of what's going on at the federal level. So it's really heartwarming to see what you guys are doing with your free time. So we do want to talk about LA100 and LA's goals. So why don't we do this? Can we share the slides? Okay. So we're going to start off, and I'll just give a little precursor that, so Dan and I are both certified energy geeks. No one would dispute that. So we're pretty deep into this stuff. And so as a result, we're also, have a lot on our plates. So we did not spend hours, kind of going through these slides, polishing this off. It's going to be very informal. And we welcome your questions, comments. You guys care if people ask questions in the middle, or would you prefer they wait till the end?
We generally ask people to wait till the end, and then they'll be able to enter their questions in the chat.
Okay, very good. So let's start with some history. LA100, where did that come from? So there's a few, I guess, historical events here. Going back to 2016 and the Council File 16-0243. And that called on the LAWP to basically form a research partnership to investigate the possibility of achieving 100% renewable energy for the DWP. So that's what kicked off the NREL study. The NREL study looked at several scenarios and pathways towards achieving 100%. It says renewable energy. I think it's just, more broadly 100% carbon free. And so that study was completed around 2021, I think, and with conclusions that yes, there are pathways to achieve 100%, clean energy, that, it is doable. So, so there was a lot of excitement at that time that, kind of like, oh, yes, we're going to do this. Then in 2018, the SB100 law passed. So at the state level, there's been several laws mandating, more aggressive renewable energy targets. There was a 33% law that was passed like 10 years ago, then a 50%. Then SB100 was the state's 100% clean energy goal. That's 100% of total retail sales coming from renewable energy sources or zero carbon, basically zero carbon resources by 2045. At the state level, they've since added a interim goal of 2035 at 90%. So the LA goal is more aggressive than the state goal. So in 2021, we had Council File 21-0352, which codified what we currently call the LA100 goal. And so, but the wording, it's very, you need to understand the exact wording, because as it says, this ordinance calls on the DWP to prepare a strategic long-term resource plan that achieves 100% carbon-free energy by 2035 in a way that is equitable and has minimal adverse impact on ratepayers. But the wording, notice the words, prepare a strategic long-term resource plan. So this ordinance doesn't mandate that we're actually at 100% clean energy or carbon-free in 2035. It just says they have to prepare a plan to achieve that. It also is very vague in terms of how you calculate the 100%. And there's some nuances in how you do that. They can make it harder or easier. But people want to know, like, what happens if we don't get there by 2035? Well, the city's not going to find itself. This is like an internal goal, like getting to zero waste or zero wasted water. These are internal targets or goals that we're trying to achieve, but they're not like hard, fast, laws. Let's go to the next slide. And so here we have, this is a carbon emission reduction, what the carbon emission targets have been starting in 2000, where we were in 2000. And then you see these, aggressive goals. If you follow the LA100 plan, well, in 2030, you're at 1.6 MMT, which I believe is a million metric tons of CO2. The SP100, if you follow that path, you'd still have a little bit more. And even when you get to the zero, timeframe of 2035, 2045, at the state level, if you only follow the state goal, you would still have a little bit of carbon emissions because there's still energy that's lost in transmission losses that is fossil-based. And so, but the LA100 is a stricter target that's based on generation, not retail sales. So what that means is for SB100, you would look at the LA City's total retail consumption of electricity and say, okay, 100% of that has to be from clean sources. But for the LA goal, we're looking at the actual generation of the power, and 100% of the generation of power that's serving the LA city has to be from clean sources. And so that adjusts for things like transmission losses, energy losses. There's different types of losses. So it is a little bit more of an aggressive goal. So go to the next slide.
I would love to.
Yep. And Dan, feel free to throw in anything I'm misstating. So this bar graph shows you what has to happen to achieve this goal of 100% clean energy by 2035. And it also looks at an interim goal of 80% renewables by 2030. And so historically, from 2015 to last year, the DWP acquired 1921 megawatts of clean energy resources which basically means solar, wind. It could be geothermal, but I don't think we've had much of that. So that's predominantly solar and wind, and averaging 192 megawatts per year. Well, then going forward between 2026 and 2035, in order to achieve this goal, we'll have to add 6792 megawatts of these clean energy resources, averaging 679 megawatts per year. So we'd have to really pick up the pace. And if you look at the procurements, we're going to talk about a project called Elan Solar that just got completed. There was a Red Cloud Wind project. There was a Beacon Solar project. Some of these projects I worked on. I can tell you from firsthand experience, I know the city's procurement process very well. It takes a very long time to get through these processes and actually get a contract and build a project. So this really calls on them stepping up the procurement plan, the procurement efforts dramatically. Probably means hiring more staff. So they're going to have to do things more quickly than they've done things in the past to come near achieving this goal. Let's go to the next slide, please. And so here's a little bit more color on what it would take to achieve the goal. And so I like the graph at the right because it has the color codes for all the different technologies. And you still do have, so you'd have some gas in here. So Apex, the striped pattern, that's a gas plant. There's also, I think the gray is in-basin gas. So you do see the gas fire generation, falling off around 2034, and including the IPP gas, and that's the intermittent power plant in Utah. Whereas you see probably the technology with the highest growth is the solar. And so my graph has been, I think the orange is the solar. I can't see the bottom of the legend. So it calls for like I said, dramatic growth in solar and wind, with the fossil fuel falling off. In 2036, wind and geothermal will account for nearly 1/3 of total generation. And the bullet in the middle, in 2035, generation exceeds retail sales by 49%. There's a few reasons why that happens. It doesn't really sound logical. Why would you generate 49% more than what you actually need? That's because of transmission losses. Also, as we go forward, we're going to have a lot more battery storage, because you're going to have too much solar generation during the day that has to be shifted to the evening through the lithium batteries or batteries storage period. And when you do that, you lose some energy. So you don't get, if you put 1 megawatt hour into a battery, you don't take 1 megawatt hour out. And so because of these losses, as you have more batteries, you're going to have to generate a lot more than what you actually need to use. And then, as I mentioned, natural gas is going to drop off to 15% in 2030, 0% in 2035, if all goes as planned. And so in-basin natural gas, we're going to talk more about that later, provided 15% of our generation last year. And I'll save the hydrogen, talking about in-basin green hydrogen providing less than 3% of generation in 2035. There's a big question mark about how we're going to accomplish the green energy goal, which we'll save that for later. So next slide, please. And this is a snapshot from, looks like it's yesterday. So Dan is good at pulling out these real-time energy graphs. I don't know if there's a legend here, Dan, but I assume, can you talk? Oh yeah, I see it at the bottom now. Okay, so I guess if I move my cursor, I don't see the bottom of the slide. So I have to wait until, okay, there it is. So the total renewables is, as you can see, taking up the lion's share of our generation during the middle part of the day. And it's as you go in the evenings, you still have, the natural gas picks up. And then what's the blue that's picking up as well?
That's water. That's hydropower.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So we still have a significant amount of our energy that's coming from natural gas. So it is going to take, it's going to be quite a transition to go completely off that. And it looks like we have nuclear base load at the bottom there. So, but I mean, these graphs also exist for the Cal ISO, which is the grid that the majority of the state, or about 75% of the state, is on. So we're not on the Cal ISO grid because LAWP has its own grid. But Cal ISO shows its own graphs of like real time, how much solar is contributing to the peak, and just the growth in renewables adoption statewide, or in the CAISO footprint. So let me go to the next slide. Eland. Do you want me to cover Eland, Dan?
Sure.
So Eland is the largest solar project that the DWP has onboarded to date. And I think they just commissioned the second phase of it. And so, so the solar, I think it's 400 megawatts. Is that both phases or is that just the second phase? I thought
That's
it
the
was,
sum.
that's
all together, both phases.
all together. Okay, both phases are 400 megawatts. So the biggest project that DWP has onboarded, I worked on a project called Beacon, which onboarded, gosh, 9 years ago. That was 250 megawatts. And so then they had Springbok, which actually Springbok may have been better if you count all the phases of Springbok. It might have been over 600 or about 600. But this one's still a huge victory in terms of scaling up solar and with battery storage. Some of those older projects didn't have the batteries. And the batteries are really critical because that's what allows them to shift the energy from 2 p.m. into the early evening hours. Because what we're seeing, you know, across the state and across really the country is when you increase adoption of solar, like these massive utility scale solar projects, you have overgeneration. You have too much generation at, you know, 2 to 4 p.m. and not enough in the early evening hours. And so it's really critical to have the battery storage, even if it's 4 hours, to get you over that evening hump. It's also something called the duck curve. And so there is a lot of, you know, research and more commercial efforts to increase the duration of the batteries to get to 6, 8, or 10 hours. Right now, that's mainly being done through just stacking up more lithium. But there are efforts, there's a lot of, you know, up and coming technologies to get you to, you know, 6, 8, 10 hours of storage to cover overnight hours, which is going to be increasingly important if we want to go to, you know, towards 100% clean energy future.
I want to mention a couple more things about Eland. First off, it can generate power for more than 12 hours a day. It's got so many extra solar panels on it, so it can charge those batteries while it's powering the grid. So you can just think of it as a 300 megawatt steady power source for 12 to 14 hours a day. And this is the main arrow in LADWP's quiver. They're going to be putting in something like 10 more of these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have to. Should we go to the next slide? Okay, do you want to take over from this point on the in-basin dispatchable?
Sure. So one of the things that has generated some conflict between environmentalists and DWP is people, including me, originally wanted just to like stop doing gas power plants, period, inside the city limits. And unfortunately, geography makes that hard because there are a limited number of pathways to get power in from out of the city. And when any of those pathways go down, we need the generators inside the city to pick up the slack so people's lights don't go out and their fridges don't thaw. In the 2024 heat storm, local power plants provided more than half of our power. So that was really important. When there's big, long, rainy, cloudy periods that cover a large area and they reduce our solar generation significantly, we need them then too. And you'll see a graph of when that happens. And then finally, when just regardless of heat waves, when there's wildfires that can cut our supply, and wildfires are just increasing like crazy. So we really need protection from them. This is a geeky view of, I'll go back to the other slide in a minute. This is a geeky view of the same thing. There's two main reasons to have in-basin generation. One is when there aren't many renewables, and the other is when there's a transmission outage. And you can see in this graph how LA100 might pick up the slack with in-basin generation. But here's an aside. This is kind of a fun thought. It isn't anything definite, but I was at an AQMD meeting where conservatives shot down a proposal to encourage heat pump water heaters. And one of the things they were upset about was the unreliability of the grid, right? That was a serious reason they shot down the idea of electric water heaters, which is kind of funny since half the country uses electric water heaters. But anyway, one way to address that might be to take to build a new transmission line and put it underground so that wildfires couldn't affect it. And in fact, at one of the advisory group meetings, DWP mentioned that some company was thinking about doing that. And the project's called Kegel, and they're converting an oil pipeline or gas pipeline to an electric transmission line underground that would bring in 2 gigawatts of power. So if anybody's interested in that possibility, it's kind of fun to think about. There's a link. So going back to the reality, this is a bunch of heat maps of when we have solar generation, when we charge and discharge batteries under LA100. And at the bottom, my favorite part of this graph is it shows when we need in-basin generation to make up for not quite enough wind, solar, and battery. And so you can see if you squint, you can see that along the left, along the vertical axis are months, and along the horizontal are hours of the day. And you can see that in January and December, most of the day, we need 200, 250 megawatts of local generation on average. Sometimes it'll be more, sometimes it'll be less. Now, we could avoid that by putting in even more wind and solar, but it gets really expensive. And so this is what the model predicted given all the constraints upon it. So keep that in mind that January and December are really tough to meet our needs with pure solar and wind because of those 2-week times of low generation.
Yeah, and Dan, like another way to think about it is like if you wonder, do we really need in-basin combustion? Just by the geography of the city, it's a coastal city. The coast has kind of an L shape to it. And so the transmission lines, it becomes kind of a transmission dead end. And so during most of the time, you can get by without in-basin combustion, but you're very vulnerable to these lines that are coming in from, faraway places. So part of it is just the geography of the city being a coastal city, that it's very risky to try to, get by without any in-basin combustion.
And we're the advocates for 100% renewable energy. You should hear the people who don't like it. All right, so now we come to the cost part of the presentation. This was the subject of the very last AG meeting. And you can see that the black lines at the bottom are sort of business as usual. And the light blue line above it is what the state's SB 100 law would require. If you add up all the things that LADWP has to do to meet SB 100, you can see that starting in around 2027, rates would go up significantly. And then the dark blue line at the top is the price tag in retail rates for the LA100 more aggressive plan. And you can see that there's quite a significant premium for that last little 20%, is it? 10%? So this is a graph to ponder. Let's keep looking at different aspects of the of the price increase. This is a breakdown for LA100.
Yeah, one thing, Dan, just on that previous graph is that
Yeah.
the 2025 retail rates adding an escalator, that's not really I wouldn't call it a business as usual case. That's just a projection of, okay, what happens if you took our rates and just added a flat escalator?
Oh, yeah, true. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, even if you didn't care about renewables, rates are going to go up. They're not going to go up. It's not going to look like those black lines because you still have to replace poles and things like that. You have to change out infrastructure. So, and our DWP has a history of, frankly, just kind of like pushing things off.
Yeah.
And so, and all utilities, I've seen these graphs from many utilities that, the business as usual, no, rates are still going to go up. They just may not go up at the same rate that you see in the blue and aqua lines.
Ravi's exactly right. I misspoke. Probably a significant portion of that light blue line is just required maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is a breakdown of which pieces of LA100 contribute what to the rate increases. And the one that I want to draw your attention to, the two, there's some good news. Transportation electrification is a significant decrease, causes a significant decrease in rates. That's because they get to sell more electricity, and to do that, they get to that lets them buy more renewable energy. So they finance some of the renewable energy improvements by selling more electricity to power EVs and trucks. And then building electrification is also a win, reduces our rates, which is kind of cool, but not as much. And then the other thing I want to point out is the next thing up, the in-basin hydrogen generation, is maybe the biggest, almost the biggest contribution to the rate increase. So that's a significant thing to remember. And then I don't understand the RPS less solar NEM thing, which is the biggest. That's probably buying more solar panels, is my guess. Okay, so buying more solar panels is expensive, but in-basin hydrogen is almost as expensive. So that's LA100. Now let's look at the SB100 less ambitious plan and what drives its costs. Same thing, same benefits from electrification. There's a little bit of cost for hydrogen there, but not too much. Okay, so you now have a feel for what the most expensive parts are. Here's what the increases look like over time. They're sort of front-loaded. Most of the increases are going to happen by 2030 and a fair bit by 2035. And after that, it levels off because we'll have done most of the investments. But that 13% increase, that's 4% more than with, or 3% more than with SB100. Some people might hesitate there. I don't know. And this is my favorite part, is the bill impacts, because rates don't really tell the story. I don't know if this graph is for electricity only or if it's for your total energy bill. But I think it's for electricity. Those are some sizable increases. I would really like to see a total energy bill, including gasoline and natural gas. Okay, but here we get to something that's definitely total energy bill. It's called energy burden. And it shows that there's a fairly small difference, but a significant one, an extra percent of energy burden. It's 5% with SB100 and 6% with LA100 well, no, it's never that. It's 6% and 7% in 2037. And 6% is the danger line in theory when people talk about energy burden. But this is average over the whole city. So let's look, shall we, at what neighborhoods have the energy burden. This is a really cool graph. It's broken down by census tract, and you can see that some neighborhoods have a pretty high energy burden currently, and a lot of them have a pretty low energy burden. And if we turn on our crystal ball, here's the prediction for which neighborhoods are going to have what energy burden in 10 years under the two plans. And you can see that there are areas of concern. So this map is going to be a wonderful tool, I think, for targeting energy efficiency upgrades. So if you take all those red neighborhoods and cut their energy consumption in half, they're much better off, right? So I predict that this is going to be a big tool in how DWP targets its energy upgrades. Okay, so that's...
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. Do you know, do they provide current day graphs like this? Or is that what you showed before?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the current day. Okay,
Right.
so you do see, so it's the same areas that have the higher energy burden, it's just that they get magnified as we go forward. Okay.
Yeah, it's not really surprising, but there are a couple that are dark red in LA100, so those would need attention. So I'm just really jazzed that they have this data. Okay, so that's the main part of the presentation. We've covered sort of where we came from, what the goal is, the main tool they're going to use to get there, and the costs. And now I want to give a little more context. We have a smog problem in the city, which is sort of related. And according to the AQMD, the only way for us to deal with our smog problem is through extensive use of zero emission technologies across all stationary and mobile sources. So DWP is doing its part with LA100, but by gum, buildings and trucks and all those things need to be electrified too if we want to handle smog. So that's really important to keep in mind. And another thing that's near and dear to our hearts is Aliso Canyon. According to the CPUC, we can't shut down Aliso Canyon until we reduce natural gas demand. And the way to do that, they said, is through building electrification and energy efficiency. So a lot of the stuff that's in the LA100 plan will sort of contribute to shutting down Aliso Canyon, but it's not clear if it will do it very quickly. Just a little bit more on cost. If you look at how much it costs to get rid of each metric ton of CO2, the LA100 plan is fairly expensive. It costs $1,000 per metric ton. And a variant of the LA100 plan that just pauses the local hydrogen effort is half as expensive per metric ton of CO2 emission. So that's another slide to ponder. Moving on, here's a little bit more data. They actually studied the what if there was no local hydrogen scenario. And they said, well, it would cost 10% less, so $9 billion less. And you'd still have 1 million metric tons a year of emissions. So what was the original figure? We were at 18, so that would be like a 95% decrease over whenever the reference was, 1980. Okay. So now comes another what if. When you look at conservative comments about the LA100 plan, including those made in the advisory group, they're really worried about the cost of that last 5%. And so it's like, well, this reminds me that a lot of environmentalists are upset about using hydrogen for that last 5% because it would use lots of water in the LA basin, and we're short on pure water. And so we could kill two birds with one stone, save $10 billion, and maybe make up the difference by spending that $10 million on electrification of buildings, and thereby improve air quality more and hasten the closure of Aliso Canyon. It's a really interesting scenario, which for budgetary reasons may actually have some traction. When I talked with somebody from the Green Building Council, he was like extremely intrigued by this. It's like, I think he thought I was reading his mind or something. So anyway, this is an idea. The city council could help by passing building code changes to more strongly encourage building electrification. And DWP could sort of beef up what it's already planning to do on encouraging heat pumps and other electrification things. So ponder that. See how you feel about that. And that's it for my part of the presentation. There's links to my sources, and I'm sure we can email out a link to the presentation to anybody who's interested. Questions?
Thank you, guys. I already have like a dozen questions in mind, but I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to ask. So if you've got questions, start entering them in the chat and we'll get through as many as we can. Just right off the bat, how far are we from that limit that would allow Aliso Canyon to be closed? Like, how big a lift is that going to be?
I think it's a pretty big lift, but I don't know. I haven't been focused on that. But the CPU decision actually does tell you what the limit is, but I don't know where we are.
My feeling also is that that's maybe hard to achieve.
It is hard to achieve, but electrification is the way to get there.
So you showed on one slide that actually electrification of transportation is a bonus because they're buying more renewable energy.
Correct.
Talk to us about AI. What are the effects of AI going to be? Huge energy draws, so all of our estimates of what our projected needs are going way up. But is it going to wind up being one of these things where we can buy a bunch of cheap energy to cover AI needs?
I don't know. I do know that there aren't that many data centers in Los Angeles. They'll probably be elsewhere, is my guess. And the data centers are where most of the AI energy consumption is.
Yeah, it's like places like Arizona, Oregon, Texas. Those states are seeing a lot more data center deployment than we're seeing in the LA SoCal area.
So I know that the site that just came online is out near the Mojave, and you mentioned that LADWP is, planning 10 more sites. Are they going to be spread around? Are they all going to be kind of out in Kern County? What are the potential sites that they're looking at?
I think they are looking at sites outside of California as well, but not very far. But I bet at least half of them are going to be in Kern County.
Yeah, I think that 10 times just shows you the scale they would need to get to these goals. And so a lot of the locations are going to depend on where they have where there's transmission access. So, that Mojave corridor, there's a Barron Ridge transmission line that has excess capacity. And so they're really kind of focusing on areas that have transmission capacity to import into the LA area. So, there's lines going up to Utah, there's lines going to Arizona. So yeah, they're going to just focus on areas like, Kern County is definitely a big one because there's capacity on that transmission corridor there.
All right, Alvin is asking a question. Says on one slide it shows the trying to reduce nitrous oxide smog, but on another slide pushing hydrogen while also trying to shut down Aliso Canyon's natural gas. He says,
Well,
pardon my ignorance, but can you please make that make sense? Can you talk a little bit about the different gases that are in play here?
sure. First off, LA100 has nothing to do, in theory, with shutting down Aliso Canyon. They're completely separate efforts. It just happens that LA100 will make it easier to shut down Aliso Canyon, right? And second, local generation does produce a small amount of oxides of nitrogen, but it's a pretty small amount
Okay, I
compared
hope
to
that,
that from, say, water heaters.
yes. I hope that clarifies, Alvin, but ask further if you need more. Cheryl's asking, if we're talking about 10 more giant solar farms similar to Alon, how does LADWP, do planning for environmental impacts? What are they doing to make sure that we don't just, cite a bunch of stuff in the Mojave that's going to impact desert species without, too much thought because it's far from the LA basin at least.
So I think there's the state and the feds and a bunch of environmental groups got together and put together a desert resource set of guidelines and areas that were selected for solar based on low conflict. And I know that doesn't satisfy everybody, but at least it's a step in the right direction. And furthermore, if I had my druthers, they wouldn't be bulldozing the areas that they put in the solar panels. They'd just be drilling holes and putting posts in, and that would help a lot too. And then there's some in-between measures. I've heard of just rolling the ground flat rather than bulldozing it, and that is less damaging to dens and burrows and plants. So there are measures that can be taken, and it's up to us to encourage LAWP to do the right thing there.
And what do you think are the best pathways for a group like ours to have influence on those decisions? Is it, making public comments on proposed projects? What are the ways that we can work to make sure that these plants get built in the least damaging ways?
That's a very good question. I mean, there is a state, you could work with the legislator to try to come up with a law. That might backfire though, and might turn into something that makes it very hard to make solar plants at all. I don't know. I thought about it, but I don't have an answer.
I can add a couple things. For the big projects in the desert, they're all going to have an EIR and require a CUP from the authority having jurisdiction, which is, Kern County in this case. So there's always, the possibility for input in the EIR process. And then the question also mentions, endangered species or desert tortoises. If it's a federal endangered species, then the developer has to get a take permit, before they can move forward. So yeah, there are, a few checkpoints here, but I think the EIR is a big one.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
We have a question from Polly. Does LADWP sell solar power that they're generating to other utilities? So when we talk about, overproducing during the day, is the only thing to do with that direct it toward battery storage, or is sometimes some of that power sold to other utilities when we're producing excess?
I don't know. I know that other utilities do tend to sell it. But as all the utilities ramp up their solar production, there's going to be fewer and fewer off-takers. So I think really the answer is just treat the overgeneration as it's like, okay, we had too much rain and so the dam couldn't hold all the rain.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Too many protons. Too many electrons at once. Couldn't deal.
Yeah,
All
it
right.
also is,
And it's also an opportunity for an entrepreneur to install more batteries somewhere.
Yes, so Fred is asking, would increasing residential battery storage for solar installations in the city reduce the need for in-basin generation? If we had, every home having a battery, would that be enough to counteract the need to have an in-basin generation station?
Well, yes and no. It would help some, but it doesn't help with the 2 week long periods where there isn't enough sun. So while even in that case, it would help a little, it's not enough. I do know that from here on out, every solar installation should have a battery basically, because the grid is just full of solar at the middle of the day. And I do know that these virtual power plants, which could be sort of formed by telling all the batteries, okay, now it's time to discharge. Those can be really helpful in an emergency, but they still don't cover the 2 week period.
I
Yeah,
was also
those,
yeah.
preparing for longer term or mid-range disasters seems like it's going to be a real sticking point.
But those local batteries, they could totally be a lifesaver for your family if you can run your refrigerator 12 hours a day. Hey, it won't thaw, So
Right. Right. Good point.
One
Alvin,
comment too about selling like excess solar energy to neighboring states. If you're in the Cal ISO, that's happening, frequently. Because the Cal ISO, they directly ship power, to Arizona, for example, because the sun goes down there. I mean, they need more our solar energy when we have excess. DWP isn't part of the Cal ISO, but they are part of what's called the energy imbalance market, and that's where they can trade these energy imbalances with the CAISO. And then the CAISO is also starting this EDAM, enhanced day-ahead market, which will just increase the collaboration with DWP and the neighboring states to trade, excess energy.
so we're kind of curious about the role of a municipal power provider like LADWP versus the big, conglomerates like PG&E. Do you think it's a benefit for like us not to be part of CAISO, or do you think it's a drawback?
I mean, there's obviously pros and cons, but our rates have been lower. The municipals that are not part of Cal ISO have had lower rates than the utilities that are part of the ISO. That's just a fact. And we've had arguably better reliability. So like there have been many like extreme heat events in the Cal ISO that resulted in emergencies that, we weren't part of. So I think it's worked to LA's benefit. But we do have to catch up in terms of, aging infrastructure and things like that.
yeah, it's possible that some of the benefit in low rates is simply because we've been deferring maintenance and it's going to get us sometime.
Yeah, I think we've all learned some lessons from PG&E's deferred maintenance over the years. We don't want to be, starting fires just because we're too cheap to pay to replace a line.
Mhm.
Um, Coming back to cost though, I attended one of the LADWP public, meetings about where we are. And honestly, I thought people were going to revolt when they got to the slides about how much the rates are going to go up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great to talk about, making homes more efficient and that will keep the bills from rising too much, but I'm not sure that's going to be sufficient to keep LA livable for large sections of the population who are already struggling to pay at the current rates.
Mm-hmm.
So is there discussion within LADWP of, you know, how else this can go that isn't just a monotonically increasing energy rate.
Well, there's the compromise proposal that is probably on the tip of everybody's tongue that I mentioned in the bottom of this proposal.
Yeah, is that getting some traction?
I imagine that it's sort of like on everybody's minds, and then somebody's going to speak up and it will all gel and happen. That's my personal hope. But there are a lot of people who are very invested in getting to exactly 100% by 2035.0, right? And I think that we need to be a little more flexible in order to avoid the pitchforks, right? The pitchforks come, all of this goes away, and we're screwed, right? So a little flexibility could go a long way here.
That's what I'm worried about is the pitchforks.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that needs to be discussed. It needs to be transparent, you know, because yeah, it's not just saying it's 100% or at all costs. That doesn't really make sense. I would also point out, if you look at this graph, you have things like transmission projects, distribution upgrades, staffing that would apply even if we didn't have this very aggressive goal. So, you know, like if you look at neighboring states, like, you know, Arizona, go up to like Idaho, Utah, those states do not have aggressive decarbonization goals at all. Their rates are also going up dramatically. So it's just because of aging infrastructure. So going the fossil fuel path doesn't necessarily mean, it definitely doesn't mean that your rates don't go up. So you have to kind of parse through, okay, what's actually attributable to this goal we have versus what can we temper down, you know, or, you know, if we didn't have such an aggressive goal.
Yeah.
Okay. So much to dive in here, but the questions keep coming. Wayne is wondering if DWP has incentives to build infrastructure for things like charging EV batteries during the day when we have excess solar, like maybe employer sites, so that while people are at work, that's when the charging happens. And what about reducing the storage needs with vehicle to home? I'm
Well,
also wondering, as we lose federal incentives, is there going to be discussion of bumping up local incentives for solar?
well, DWP already has great local incentives in the form of net energy metering. It's really a good incentive, even though it's not quite as good as the deal that I got 15 years ago. The DWP is certainly aware of the mismatch between when people usually charge and when it would be good for the grid for them to charge their EVs. And they're aware of the possibilities of vehicle to grid or vehicle to home. So using vehicles as batteries to benefit the grid. But they can't, I don't think they can afford to lead on all fronts. They're leading a lot with LA100 and they're leading a lot with IPP. And I think they can't lead everywhere. So yes, if the LEUSD decides to go whole hog on vehicle to grid with all its school buses, that would help some.
Yeah, that would be great. But I think pressure there has to come on the LAUSD side, not from the LADWP side.
Yeah.
So looking at what's currently on the screen, are there decision points that are going to come up about like whether to move ahead with hydrogen or not? And how flexible is the timing? Like, can LADWP just kind of delay on deciding whether to invest in hydrogen? Are they already invested to an amount that means they want to keep moving
Okay.
forward because of sunk costs? How can we
So
back out?
there's several kinds of hydrogen involved. One is at the Intermountain Power Plant in Utah. That doesn't have the same problems as the hydrogen here in LA because they're fully they have full control over generation and storage there, and there's ample storage. And so the only problem at IPP is They're planning on burning it during the day, which is really, really dumb. And every time you speak to anybody from LADWP, ask them, so are you going to be burning hydrogen during the day while the sun is shining and you're making electricity that you could just use instead directly? And they'll go, yeah. And you should make them embarrassed every time you can, and they will fix that. And the way they'll fix that is, this is a long geeky story, but basically adding batteries at one or both ends of the transmission line from Utah, so that they can power down the generators in Utah, and then the batteries can take over for half an hour if there's a problem to give the generators time to start up, right? Okay, too much geek speak, but anyway.
Also, oh, good.
I think I lost the thread of the question.
It was whether or not LADWP is going to forge ahead with in-basin hydrogen.
No,
or
no, no.
not.
So DWP internally, they're going, I'm pretty sure they're all going, are we really going to do this? We're really going to do this? And they're waiting for people like us to stand up and say, excuse me, we would like to pause, go ahead and build that power plant to be hydrogen capable, but then just don't buy the hydrogen for now. Like, just don't. Just like, don't until it's cheap.
Yeah, that's also
But do
just the way
everything else.
There's also the technology is evolving. Like, you know, GE, Mitsubishi, all the turbines they're making, they're all hydrogen ready or hydrogen capable. That doesn't mean you have to use hydrogen.
Yeah.
And so that's just what the market is producing right now. So that's what's going to go in an IPP. That's scattergood if that goes forward. But that doesn't mean you have to use hydrogen. It just means it's hydrogen ready. Up to 30%.
Yes, and my feeling is that, you know, if we just forge ahead with the solar, et cetera, and hold back a bit, the technology may evolve in a way that makes the whole problem a bit easier.
And making the whatever turbines we do renew, like scattergood, be hydrogen ready is not very expensive, and it's future proofing them. So
Wayne is asking, could hydrogen be replaced with high temperature thermal storage, coupled with steam turbines? Like, is LADWP interested in anything other than, you know, lithium ion batteries? Like, are they exploring other forms?
I think they are. I think they did I think they explored thermal storage at Valley Generating Station, and they may explore it again in the future. I don't know if that'll meet the 2-week goal, but it might.
Yeah, that's a good point. But again, I wonder if, you know, 5 years from now, technology will have gotten us to the point where other forms of, you know, energy storage might do the trick.
Right. And then also geothermal is coming along, and it might get cheap in 10 years. So
Yes, I was going to ask if they're thinking geothermal out toward the Mojave as well as just solar.
it all depends on how the technology evolves. But I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful there.
I know they've done RFIs for different long duration storage technologies, and there are many out there like flow batteries, different chemistries that are non-lithium. The challenge is trying to scale those up. Many of them are just doing pilots in a 1 megawatt, 10 megawatt scale. They're not yet able to do 100 megawatts or more. So that's where I guess we need to see more commercialization.
Okay. Pete, I see you have your hand up. Do you want to unmute and ask a question directly? And then, yeah, we probably just have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
Yeah, sure. Just really adding on to the response to your question, Sharon, about do we need to wait for better technology? And I would argue we need to do both. We need to deploy rapidly the things that are at deployable stage right now, which is primarily solar, wind, and lithium ion batteries, but also be developing multiple other storage mechanisms. One really heartening thing, not quite 3 years ago, either Peninsula Clean Energy or Silicon Valley Clean Energy, one of those two, issued a request for information looking for medium duration storage, so multiple hours out to several days. They got 300 responses to their RFI, covering 23 discrete energy storage technologies, from battery chemistries other than lithium ion to compressed air, hot water, hot molten liquid stuff, hot bricks, multiple gravity things. So there's a lot coming, and some of those 23 competing technologies will turn out to be cost effective and others won't. But we should deploy like crazy the things we have on the shelf right now.
The ones that are cost effective, yeah.
Agreed.
Yep.
This is the same problem as when I ask my kids to empty the dishwasher and they pick out the one thing that's, unusual, this, a muffin tin or something, say, well, I don't know where to put this. And I say, well, do you know where to put other things like the silverware and the plates and the bowls? Oh, yeah, I know those. Well, maybe do those first, and then we'll worry about the weird muffin tin, right? If we know that we have things that are currently available and working, let's do those first. All right, well, just one final question because it's already 8:15. But do you guys think this is actually all possible? Do you really think we're going to make it 2035? Is this really all feasible?
I think that we're going to install a lot of solar, and it's going to be good. I don't know if we'll get to 90% or 93% or 86%. I don't care. Those are all good numbers.
Yeah, I think 90% seems very attainable, both at the LA and the state level. Whether we go beyond that and how far we go, I think that's what remains to be seen.
Yeah, and instead of saying, oh, well, we may not make it all the way, focusing on, 90%, that would be great.
Yeah, especially if you look at like the carbon reductions, the incremental carbon emissions between 90 and 95, 95 to 100, it's actually not that great. So getting to 90 would be a huge victory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I tried to pull back the camera and look at more context. Electrification does both reduce carbon emissions and reduce smog, and maybe that's a better place to put some of our dollars. So
Agreed. Okay, at this point, it is time to let you guys go, and we are so grateful. This is the time when I'm going to ask everyone to unmute and give a warm round of applause to our guest speakers for all of this incredible information. We can stop sharing the slides and just cheer for Dan and Ravi, who really, gave us an insider's view tonight into the whole process.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
thank you for letting
What
us
you're
be of
doing.
service.
It was
Really
terrific,
appreciate your
guys.
work on this, guys.
Thank you so much.
thing.
Appreciate it.
And, we'll come back to you for an update in 5 years and see where we are.